So you've gone through transformation phase is something that you spoke about, which is moving from one brand to rebranding yourself into another company. So when you really look at this kind of a transition, what are the ways in which you approach the problem? Because the consumer has seen you as a brand which is earlier a very different brand. Now it's a new uh, brand that they're going to be dealing with. And for example, I saw your settlement ratios, it is at 99.66%. Okay. So therefore, the transition of one brand to another, how have you looked at that?
So for us, I think the challenge really was that how can you kind of reposition yourself from a name that had kind of been around for some time, into a completely different name. I think what helped for us in our case was the fact that Bandhan as a name had kind of was had been established, has been around for some time, especially in the eastern part of India, which is where it was very strong. Um, but for us is, I think the other way that we were trying to look for it is that you have 23, 24 life insurance in India. Okay, what is the space that you want to occupy? At the core of it, really, the product that we're selling is fundamentally the same. So how do you make yourself more distinct? And for us, it was going back to our roots and figuring out, okay, what is it that we stand for? Bandhan as a brand stands for access, for inclusion, for financial security. And in an industry where most brands are fighting for the same high income, salaried customer, we saw an opportunity at that point to do something different, right? To make insurance more accessible, especially for those who don't have easy access to insurance. Which is, so when I say self-employed, I want to maybe give people some context about why even self-employed. If you look at India's working population today, right, 3 out of 5, working class people today are self-employed. Another 20% are what we would call casual labor. That leaves only 1 out of 5 people today who are actually what we would call the salaried class, right? So that means there's a huge chunk of the population today who is underserved, right? And they're underserved. Why? Because they don't necessarily have, as private insurers, we have tended to prefer the salaried class simply because they have all of the paperwork that's necessary for us to kind of, make it, to make a decision about selling them a long-term product like life insurance. It's an easier pitch, and the company really understands much better, the profile of the person that they are buying from. And for us, we said we have 22 other players who are fighting for this market, right? Why don't we look at really where the need is? India today has a protection gap of 95%, which means that 95% of the people in India need insurance protection, don't have any insurance protection or don't have adequate insurance protection. Right? So that's a very, it's not just sizable in terms of a market, but that's a lot of families in India today who are just maybe one tragedy away from financial distress. So for us, really, it was about how do we get, how do we stay true to ourselves, our identity, and make ourselves more relatable and accessible for them. So one,
So when you wanted to do this, you had several stakeholders where you had to build the brand, right? So normally when you think of marketing, you only think of campaigns and logos and brands, but in this case you have the agents, you've got the distributors, you've got bank assurance partners. So the way you do branding would be very, very different, or rebranding would be very different. So what is the approach that you took?
I think we were very fortunate, right, in our transition. On the one hand, as a fully digital business, which is what we were known as before when we were Aegon Life, we a lot of our distribution at that point was managed through our distribution partners. We didn't really have a very strong retail physical presence, right? So that made things like the transition, the number of touch points that we had really were mostly digital, and digital touch points are easy to kind of switch over. But once we actually transitioned into Bandhan Life today, we've started to build out our retail presence all across the country. So today we are present in about more than 1,700 branches of Bandhan Bank, spread all over the country, and that number will continue to grow up. So in that sense, I would say, as far as brand transitions go, this was, we were fortunate to do it from a digit. A lot of businesses go the other way. They want to shift from, being brick
Yeah,
and mortar
correct.
to click and mortar. In our case, we said, okay, fine. The customer we're serving is really someone who needs a physical interaction, right? They lead an advisory cell. So how do we ensure that we are present physically, at that moment of truth when they're trying to make a decision, and really we've been building out our presence on there.